the next session of River Talk. This is episode number 3. I will be today's moderator. I am Zach Marburger. I am joined by Ashlyn, Colin, and Trey. And today's subject is demand-side economics versus supply-side economics. So if you guys would like to start by just explaining the general outline of what supply-side is.
Right. So some of the basic rule kind of guidelines of supply-side economics is, tax cuts and more money, more income generated, and more business merging. A lot of output and exports really kind of getting business booming.
Deregulation of business and tax cuts and more leeway for the top 1%, with the belief that it will trickle down and benefit the lower classes as a result.
Right.
And Ashlyn, what would you say demand economics would be? Just a general outline.
Demand is more of like, kind of what like Bernie Sanders is running on, like it's for the working class, right?
Were you going to say something? Okay. So the whole thought behind demand-side economics is really increase taxes on the wealthiest in this country, and then kind of lower taxes for the low-income and middle-income Americans, just to the hope that it would generate a more consumer-based economy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about taking in instead of like outputting, I guess. I don't know if it would really take out like manufacturing, but stuff
and
like
that. That's part of the reason why there are quite a few people, particularly more our age, kind of in the group that like hear, less expenses for things like education and healthcare, and they see that as an initial benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But where I would disagree with demand side is, you see people saying, we're going to reduce healthcare, we're going to reduce costs of education, and then they say eventually things will be free. Nothing's ever free. It's got to come out of somebody's pocket, and so then they think to overtax or to put heavier tax on the people at the top.
Now, would you say that it actually, in the long term, would actually hurt the economy as a whole just by having a demand-side economic platform?
I mean, we've seen good examples of both economic kind of values kind of demonstrated. We saw with FDR, with the New Deal, the real legitimizing of unions and workers' rights. But then we've seen, positive examples of supply side with Reaganomics, with an incredible booming business and a lot of income generated. So where I see as people getting excited about lower costs for healthcare immediately and initially, but then they realize later down the road that eventually I'm going to have to start paying for somebody else's education,
because eventually the rich are going to run out of money, and you're just going to have to start taxing the middle income, and they're going to run out of money, then you'll have to tap the lower
But then,
income.
what do you say about, say, for instance, countries like Canada, Western European countries who adopted this whole system of universal health care, how they're able to cover it, and yet, our country has the highest, or the largest economy in the world, and yet we're incapable of even covering the expenses, per se, of our citizens compared to European countries.
Right. Well, I would probably say that people, countries like Canada, and some of like the Scandinavian countries like Finland, they have these universalized healthcare systems where more money comes out of everybody's taxes, and so then that makes healthcare affordable for everybody. Where I would argue that the downside of that is that American healthcare, not to sound like a globalist, is the best in the world. It costs up through the roof, but rather than waiting for 4 months to get a knee replacement, you wait like 4 days, and then you're immediately.
One argument I have against them nationalizing the U.S. healthcare system is we're a nation of 300 million people, well, 300 million plus now. If you take a look at all the Scandinavian countries together, that's 30 million people. Canada's like 32, 34 million people. The cost is going to be much higher to insure 300 million, whereas compared to 30 million.
That is a fair point, though, because a lot of European countries are only the size of our states, so there is kind of that aspect of it where you have to look at overall size. They can afford probably better because they are smaller areas, they have less population. We're a huge country. We are the size of like tons of these little countries put together. So So it does have an effect on it.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, don't get me wrong, free healthcare for everybody is great on paper, but then once you apply it to such a diverse, culturally and socioeconomically diverse country like the United States, it's a little bit more, it needs a little bit more complex thought than just make it free or make it affordable.
And it has been shown since the 1980s under Reagan's administration when he switched to supply side. Who was before him? Was it Jimmy Carter?
Jimmy Carter, yeah.
Yeah. So during his presidency, while he did switch to supply side economics, you see that wealthy people basically at one point they owned about 40% of the nation's wealth, while wages for average Americans remained stagnated. And so what would be a possible way in which to actually raise wages for those people? Because even though it's benefiting the top, it's not benefiting everyone. Not everyone's feeling the same effect that it's giving off.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the 40% going to the top one. What I would say is that, the thing with supply side economics is that one of the main goals is to really kind of slow inflation. I won't say do away with because that's impossible, but like slowing inflation and therefore like increasing the value of a dollar. Annually inflation goes up like 2%. So you see these people that wages don't change much and they're getting poorer and poorer because inflation keeps steadily going up, right? But with supply side economics, I think inflation is really radically slowed.
During Bill Clinton's presidency, inflation when Reagan left office was 4.8%. Then after Bill Clinton during his presidency, at the end of it, it was 2.5%. So I would argue that perhaps demand would do a better job with inflation because it's returning more money to people who actually, because like people like wealthy people, they only need one house, they only need one car. Like they have all this money, but they're not spending on anything. And we're returning it to all these average Americans who actually make up the entire consumer base of this country. I personally think it does a better job when it comes to actually circulating money in the economy.
Right, and I personally agree with that. The other thing though is that, with supply side economics, with tax breaks to those with a certainly large amount of money, it's supposed to incentivize them to invest in more business and invest in more jobs, creating more jobs so that people can earn different wages and start to climb that ladder. I think that was one of Reagan's very points that he said when he was first running for president, to beat out Jimmy Carter, which I don't know. I think a lot of people could have beaten out Jimmy Carter, but let's move on to some of the ethical, like the people you hear recently, like Bernie Sanders, who talks about like free education. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when you look at education and making it free, like for instance, we go to community college, some people go to four-year universities. When you actually remove the debt that is accumulated through student loans, I personally think people have a lot more opportunity to do stuff more with their money compared to, oh, I have to pay like, let's just say $300, $400 a month or a week or something like that on my loan payments. And so I believe it switching to demand side when it came to education, like maybe not, or at a college level, it does a better job at returning money to people's pockets so that they can actually spend, like you can get a house, like you get out of college, you can get a house, you can buy a car, you can actually start your life in a sense.
But while being debt free.
Yeah.
Not trying to put words in your mouth, but I want to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, does that make sense?
All right, you can take this one, Colin.
Or if you'd like to.
But also, I'm forgiving or kind of paying off a student loan debt without the student themselves actually doing it, because I could be wrong, but I've been of the belief that this wasn't so much of an issue back in like 50 or so years ago, was because when people got out of college or got out of high school, whatever the situation may have been, there were jobs there waiting for people. Unfortunately, now we're seeing a lot of the good paying jobs, like in the manufacturing sector, things of the sort, they're moving overseas. And I think that's why people are having trouble paying off their debt now. And also, once again, this kind of goes back to our population factor. You would have to be paying for the education of 300 million people. So once again, there will be a cost factor there because we're much larger than countries with free education.
From a technicality standpoint, though, we're technically not paying for the college of 300,000 people. It's more like
Million.
Not an outrageous number that you were suggesting, but definitely we'd be paying a large amount. But I feel like having an overall well-educated workforce that's able to compete internationally, I think in the long term does the economy better than. And that's another thing you said about there's a lot of low-wage jobs, like there's a lot of retail jobs, there's a lot of food and service industry
Right,
jobs,
yeah.
stuff like that. It's just the wages that are there are, yes, they are going to help people. Ashlyn, got any thoughts on this?
Okay, college is expensive, that's a straight up fact, like when you're talking about that.
Absolutely.
But I don't think you can truly make it free because it's gonna cost somehow. I think it needs to cost less than it does because
Mhm.
there are people, you pay thousands of dollars for a couple weeks of school. That's a lot of money.
Mhm.
So I think maybe if you lower the cost, I don't think it can be free. I don't think that's a realistic goal.
Right.
But maybe making it more affordable will help out more.
Right.
And I should just clarify, that is technically Hillary Clinton's view on this, is that we need to just remove student debt, not make it tuition free. It's just removing the insurmountable debt that you get after you receive all the loans.
Well, I think what a lot of people might overlook about like education costs specifically, and even healthcare costs to a degree, is that the vast majority of the money you're paying is going towards administrative fees. We're paying to be taught by well-trained people, and to give us these hard, challenging classes to challenge us. And so I think what part of that, and I'm not saying that I agree with paying $50,000 for 2 semesters of college. I think that's pretty outrageous, even all of it. But it's not so.
Go.
All right, welcome back to River Talk. We had a short break there, and we're going back to Trey, who was talking about college tuition.
College tuitions and how they really are skyrocketing and they're astronomically high, and we see a lot of campaigning for lowered and completely done away with college debt. But my philosophy on college debt being so high, not that I necessarily agree with it, because I think $50,000 for 2 semesters is outrageous. But I think what part of it is, and Hillary's even said this, college isn't supposed to be easy, it's supposed to be hard. But then she goes on to say that college debt, whatever, that should be done away with. But in my perspective, in an ever-changing world where we constantly find new obstacles, I think it is something that is necessary to, feel that fire under your butt a little bit. To feel like I really have to, get my butt in gear and work hard to be able to afford this commodity.
You don't want to be, you want to work around college because you don't want to be paying to do it again.
Right.
Mhm.
But I mean, what about the people who are in, inner cities and stuff like that? They can't, say people like us, we can afford to go to a community college, maybe a 4-year university, where you can afford to take out those loans. But people in the inner cities, stuff like that, I just feel like they have a far more difficult time trying to receive the higher education. But you say you have to work for it, but sometimes it's just completely out of their reach, basically.
Because the inner city doesn't have much, if any, opportunity for the folks that live there. There's few, if any, jobs, even fewer still that are legal. There's the safety in inner cities is horrendous. You look at a place like Chicago, where more Americans have died there than in Afghanistan, where we're fighting an active war. And one of the things that I like about Donald Trump is that he's made, whether or not he'd actually be, whether or not he'd go through with it remains to be seen, but he has made an honest effort to try and win over inner city voters by promising to bring opportunities back there, making them places to invest, bring business, and, really make them a good place again.
Right.
Everything's a good place.
He's even talked to union guys like coal miners and whatnot, saying your jobs are safe. I want to keep working class people, keep the jobs and keep them growing.
All this talk about jobs and under supply side economics, under demand side, during Bill Clinton's presidency, he saw the largest creation of jobs in any presidency, 22 million. And so, whether to say they were good paid or low paid, what have you,
but people are working regardless,
Yeah.
right? And that's definitely a positive thing wherever you can find it. And you know, it can largely be attributed, you know, to FDR's administration, you know, with the New Deal and, like we said earlier, like the, you know, how much, you know, legitimacy, you know, unions have, and people will argue till the cows come home about unions, whether or not they're still relevant or they're still, you know.
You can definitely argue, though, that demand-side economics definitely brought this country out of the greatest financial recession we've ever seen.
Oh, certainly. But, go ahead.
Oh, no, you.
Okay, but then, I would absolutely agree with that, but then so you have the Depression, and then you have where FDR's and demand-side economics brings us, and then you have Reagan's administration that brings us that totally overhauls and uproots the economy to where there's so much surplus that, you know, jobs are created. You know, other countries look to America and, you know, follow our example to a degree. And so, you know, when they see that, you know, America has as much success as it has or had, however you want to look at it, you know, you see that, and they take their lead from that.
And here's just the thing with, under Reagan's administration, he left office with a 300 million, or I can't remember if it was million or billion, that's a large difference though, but he left office with a very large deficit when it came to government spending. And then Bill Clinton comes to office with demand-side economics, and he managed to have the largest, well, basically the biggest budgetary surplus since 1969. So it really, I personally think it does a better job at actually jump-starting the economy because it has more people, once again, in the market going out, buying things. You have millions of people buying things compared to those at the top who could only afford, like, I don't know, like, large.
Right. But
Yeah.
when you take a look at the situations that Reagan and Bill Clinton were in, we were both in very different situations. Ronald Reagan, we were still, you know, kind of squaring off the Soviet Union with like, you know, just kind of grunting at each other across the Bering Strait. So we were putting all of our money into weaponry and modernizing our military. And see, the one thing I kind of disagree with Reagan's administration was, I'm all for cutting taxes, but he cut taxes without making a meaningful reduction in spending in any way, shape, or form,
Yeah,
which is why we ran up those deficits.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at Bill Clinton and the economic growth we saw in the 90s, the internet kind of became more accessible to millions of Americans and people around the world, which I think would led to that economic boom that we saw in the 90s and the eventual bubble.
Right.
I love all these books.
So, okay, let's talk about where we're headed. You know, we're at the end of Obama's administration, and he's kind of, what are you guys thinking of what his kind of economic, what will people remember about Obama for his economic stamp?
I mean, definitely his push to bail out the auto industry, definitely.
Mhm.
It's going to be one of his more remembered things about actually trying to help companies in the country.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's a supply side or demand side kind of action?
I feel
That
like,
can be looked at in two different lights.
I mean, say what you will, it saved the auto industry technically. I mean, you either had two choices. You either had to go bankrupt, and then you had to have companies start from scratch or something like that. They had to fire a bunch of people. Where demand side is more kind of thought as government trying to encourage growth kind of thing, like higher taxes on the wealthy, lower on the middle, etc.
So, what do you guys think would be proper in the coming election, the coming years to get this, like, what, 20 trillion deficit? What do you guys think are the proper steps to getting that back down?
Reintroduce tariffs.
Tariffs are nice.
We need to make America a place to invest again. We have unreasonably high corporate tax rates. We have like almost no tariffs. We've made America a bad investment. I mean, why pay workers a reasonable wage here when you can go pay someone in Mexico $1 to put wheels on a Ford?
Dirt cheap, yeah, to put out, you know.
I mean, but what are your thoughts to actually like combat that?
Well, you got to lower the corporate tax rate. You know, make America, you know, a good place to bring your business. If to repatriate your money, you got to put tariffs out on everything we send overseas or bring in from an overseas facility, so that way you make American goods more appealing to the world market. Kind of messing up a little bit here.
And here's
yeah,
the thing
yes,
about
sir.
our debt. I just feel like it's just getting to the point where we honestly have no way to repay this back. It's getting to an absurdly large amount. I mean, the debt is like 15 times more than our gross domestic product we make a year. I mean,
Right, and we're one of the largest countries in the world. You know, like I said earlier, you know, other countries look to the U.S. as kind of an example almost. And you know, with a country with a population of 300 some million and 20 trillion in debt, I mean, that can't make America look any more appealing to adopt.
I mean, what it really comes down to, we have to cut spending somewhere.
Yes.
We just have so many government programs. I mean, Democrat or Republican, you have to agree, government has to cut somewhere.
Right,
Absolutely. I would agree.
And so with that, guys, we're going to end it right there for you. Hope you enjoyed this episode of River Talk. We'll see you next time.